My office, perched on the 35th floor, has always been my sanctuary, a place of quiet order high above the chaotic symphony of the city. The view is a sprawling panorama of steel and glass, a testament to a life built on discipline and hard work. It was my 60th birthday, and the day had been a pleasant, predictable series of well wishes from colleagues. I was a man who appreciated predictability. My life had been anything but, especially my relationship with my son, Leo. Our connection was a strained, difficult thing, a series of his financial crises met with my reluctant, disappointed bailouts. So when a large, elegant cake box arrived from a high-end bakery, I was genuinely surprised. The courier placed the box on the polished mahogany of my desk. Inside, a beautifully decorated carrot cake sat nestled in tissue paper. The card, written in my son's familiar, messy scrawl, read, "Happy birthday, Dad. Sorry I can't be there to celebrate with you. I know this is your favorite. All my love, Leo." A warmth spread through my chest, a flicker of hope that this might be a genuine olive branch, a sign that our fractured relationship was beginning to mend. The gesture was thoughtful, a rare thing from my often thoughtless son. Carrot cake was, indeed, my favorite. There was, however, a cruel irony to the gift. I have a severe, life-threatening allergy to nuts, a fact Leo has been intimately aware of since he was a small boy and witnessed me go into anaphylactic shock from a contaminated restaurant meal. Carrot cake is almost universally made with walnuts. I sighed, a familiar wave of disappointment washing away the initial warmth. This was typical Leo. A grand, expensive gesture undermined by a complete lack of attention to the most critical detail. I assumed it was his usual negligence, a thoughtless mistake, and not something born of malice. I appreciated the sentiment, even if the gift itself was, for me, a beautiful poison. Just then, my boss and the firm's senior partner, Mr. Harrison, walked into my office, a cheerful smile on his face. "Arthur, my friend! Happy birthday!" he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. His eyes immediately fell on the cake. "My goodness, is that a carrot cake? You know that's my weakness." I knew it well. In a strange coincidence of biology, Mr. Harrison and I shared the exact same, severe allergy to nuts. It was something we had discovered years ago at a corporate retreat, a shared vulnerability that had bonded us in a small, peculiar way. We were the two men who always had to interrogate the catering staff at company events. Given this shared knowledge, a sudden, generous thought occurred to me. The cake was useless to me, but it could bring a moment of joy to my friend. And surely, my own son, for all his flaws, would not be so monumentally stupid as to send a nut-filled cake to the father he knows has a deadly allergy. He must have remembered, for once, to order a special, nut-free version. Confident in this flawed, paternal logic, I smiled at my boss. "Please be my guest," I said, gesturing to the cake. "My son, Leo, sent it. You'd be doing me a favor." It was a decision that would expose a truth far more horrifying than mere thoughtlessness. With a delighted chuckle, Mr. Harrison pulled up a chair as I retrieved a knife and plate from the small kitchenette adjoining my office. The cake was dense and moist, and the aroma of cinnamon and sweet cream cheese frosting filled the room. It looked utterly perfect, a picture of celebratory innocence. We chatted about an upcoming merger, the casual, comfortable talk of two men who had worked together for over 2 decades. I cut a generous slice for him, placed it on the plate, and handed it to him with a fresh fork. It felt good, this simple act of sharing, a way to turn my son's flawed gift into a moment of camaraderie. He took his first bite, his eyes closing in a moment of pure, gastronomic pleasure. "Oh, that is magnificent," he mumbled, his mouth full. "Your son has excellent taste." In that instant, I felt a surge of pride. Perhaps Leo was finally growing up, finally learning the art of a well-executed gesture. But the moment was fleeting. Mr. Harrison's expression suddenly changed. His eyes flew open, a look of confusion and panic dawning. He began to cough, a dry, hacking sound, and pointed to his mouth. "Nuts!" he gasped, his voice a strangled, wheezing whisper. The word hung in the air, a death sentence. The scene exploded into a blur of pure, adrenalized terror. He stumbled from his chair, clutching at his throat, his face flushing a deep, alarming red. His breath came in ragged, desperate gasps, the horrifying sound of a man being strangled from the inside out. I screamed his name, my mind struggling to catch up with the catastrophe that was unfolding. I yelled out into the main office. "Someone call 911! Now! It's anaphylaxis!" My voice was a raw, primal roar of panic. People rushed to the door of my office, their faces a gallery of shock and horror. My trusted colleague, Sarah, was the first one to push through the crowd. The next few minutes were a frantic, chaotic nightmare. "His EpiPen!" Sarah shouted. "Does he have one?" We fumbled through his jacket pockets, our hands shaking, finding nothing. The seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity as Mr. Harrison collapsed onto the plush carpet of my office, his body convulsing, his lips turning blue. I could do nothing but watch, helpless, as my friend, my boss, suffocated to death on a piece of cake that was meant for me. The horrifying realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a mistake. This was not negligence. This was a deliberate act. The cake was a weapon, and it had just been discharged on the wrong target. The wail of sirens grew from a distant cry to a deafening scream. Paramedics burst into the office, pushing us aside, their movements a blur of professional urgency. They worked on him, shouting medical jargon, a controlled, desperate battle for his life unfolding on my office floor. As they loaded him onto a stretcher and wheeled him away, my eyes fell on the cake still sitting on my desk, a single slice missing. It looked so innocent, so festive. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the soul, that I was looking at an instrument of attempted murder. And the person who had sent it was my own son. In the aftermath, my office was no longer a sanctuary, it was a crime scene. The cheerful birthday balloons in the corner seemed to mock the grim reality of the situation. The city police arrived, their presence transforming the sterile corporate environment into something tense and official. I sat in a conference room, a cup of untouched, lukewarm coffee in my shaking hands, as a detective asked me questions in a calm, methodical voice. I was in a state of profound shock, my mind reeling, trying to reconcile the image of my son, my own flesh and blood, with the monstrous act that had just occurred. I told them everything. I explained my severe, lifelong allergy to nuts. I explained that my son, Leo, had known about it since childhood, that it was a central, unignorable fact of our family life. I described the delivery of the cake, the card, the seemingly innocent gesture. As I spoke the words out loud, the narrative of a thoughtless gift crumbled into dust, revealing the terrifying, skeletal framework of a deliberate, calculated plan. Each detail I provided, each memory of Leo's awareness of my allergy, became another piece of evidence in an indictment against him. My colleague Sarah became my anchor in the storm. She handled the police with a calm efficiency I was incapable of, ensuring I had water, fielding calls from concerned executives, and acting as a quiet, steadying presence in the chaotic whirlwind of the investigation. When the detective finally left, she sat with me in the silent conference room, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside as dusk settled. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of deep sympathy and a stark, journalistic curiosity. "Arthur," she said gently, "I have to ask. Is there any reason at all, that Leo would want to harm you?" Her question, as direct and painful as it was, forced me to step out of my shocked disbelief and confront the ugly possibilities I had been avoiding for years. I thought of Leo's mounting gambling debts, whispers I had heard from other family members. I thought of his last business venture, a disastrous tech startup that had collapsed, leaving him financially ruined. I remembered my recent refusal to bail him out yet again, telling him he needed to finally stand on his own 2 feet. And then, a colder, more terrifying memory surfaced, a casual conversation a few months ago, where Leo had asked pointed, unusually detailed questions about my will and my life insurance policy. Just as the full, horrifying picture of a motive was snapping into focus, my phone rang. It was the hospital. My heart hammered against my ribs. I answered, expecting the worst. A calm, professional voice on the other end informed me that Mr. Harrison was alive. The paramedics had managed to stabilize him in the ambulance. He was in critical condition, but the doctors were optimistic he would make a full recovery. A tidal wave of relief so powerful it almost made me weep washed over me. My friend would live. But that relief was immediately followed by a cold, hard dread. Mr. Harrison had survived. And now, I had to confront the son who had, in all likelihood, just tried to murder me. I knew I couldn't go to the police and accuse my own son without facing him first. It was a visceral, paternal need, a desperate desire to look him in the eye and see for myself if any flicker of the boy I had raised still existed. Sarah argued against it, her voice a plea of reason, warning me of the danger, of the unpredictability. But my decision was made. This was a confrontation that had to happen, a final, terrible reckoning between a father and the son he no longer knew. I had to hear the lie from his own lips. I drove to his apartment, a trendy, overpriced loft in a part of the city I rarely visited. The building was all glass and steel, a facade of success that I now knew was built on a foundation of debt and desperation. I hadn't been there in over a year. The last time I had visited, it was to give him a check, another futile attempt to plug the holes in his sinking financial ship. As I stood outside his door, my heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I was about to confront a man who had tried to kill me, and all I felt was a profound, bottomless sadness. When he opened the door, the look on his face was not one of concern or surprise. It was a look of pure, unadulterated shock, a deer caught in the headlights. He stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. It was the face of a man who had expected his father to be in an emergency room, or worse. In that single, unguarded expression, I had my confirmation. He was guilty. His shock was not that something terrible had happened, but that I was standing here, whole and unharmed, to tell him about it. "Something terrible happened today, Leo," I said, my voice eerily calm as I stepped into his apartment, which was a mess of unpaid bills and take-out containers. "The cake you sent. You know my boss, Mr. Harrison? He has the same allergy as I do. He took a bite. He almost died, Leo. He's in the hospital. The police are involved." I watched him as I spoke, watched the color drain from his face, watched his carefully constructed composure crumble into raw, undisguised panic. He was not horrified by what had happened to Mr. Harrison. He was terrified of being caught. His denial was a pathetic, transparent lie. "A mistake," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. "It must have been a mistake at the bakery. I ordered it from a new place online. I must have forgotten to specify nut-free. Oh my God, Dad, I'm so sorry, I need to call the hospital." He was already trying to build his alibi, to construct a narrative of a tragic accident. But I could see the truth in his shifty eyes, in the tremor in his hands. I had looked into the face of my son and seen a stranger, a man so consumed by his own desperation that he was willing to murder his own father for money. The last shred of my paternal love withered and died in that moment, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Returning to my own quiet, orderly apartment after the confrontation with Leo felt like stepping into a different dimension. The familiar comfort of my home was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of violation. My son had tried to kill me. The thought was so monstrous, so unnatural, that my mind still struggled to fully accept it. But my conversation with him had erased any doubt. His weak, panicked denial was a confession in itself. I knew then that I couldn't let this go. For my own safety, and for the sake of justice for Mr. Harrison, I had to find proof. My love for my son had been replaced by a grim, necessary duty to expose the truth. I met with Sarah and 2 detectives from the city police department the next morning. We gathered in the same conference room where I had been questioned just a day before, but this time, I was not a shocked victim. I was a key witness, actively participating in the investigation against my own child. The first and most obvious step was to verify Leo's alibi. He had claimed to have ordered the cake from a new online bakery. The detectives, armed with the name he had given me in his panicked lie, immediately began their work. Within hours, the first piece of hard evidence fell into place. The bakery Leo had named had no record of any order from him, not on that day, not ever. They were a specialty bakery that, in fact, prided themselves on being a completely nut-free facility. It was an amateur, easily disproven lie, the kind of mistake a desperate, arrogant man would make, a man who believed he was cleverer than everyone else. The foundation of his story was a fabrication, and with that single fact, the entire structure of his innocence collapsed. The detectives, now armed with probable cause, obtained a warrant to search Leo's apartment and to access his electronic records. What they found painted a chilling, premeditated picture that was far worse than a crime of passion or a moment of desperation. His internet search history was a digital chronicle of a murder plot. Most common lethal food allergies. How to order custom cakes online anonymously. Anaphylactic shock duration and survival rates. And the final damning searches. How long does probate take? And challenging the validity of a last will and testament. The evidence was overwhelming, a cold, methodical blueprint for patricide. He had researched my death, planned the delivery, and was already looking into how to get his hands on my money. He was not just a desperate son who had made a terrible mistake, he was a cold, calculating predator who had been actively plotting to kill me. The obstacle of my own paternal denial, the last, faint hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, was completely obliterated. I was faced with the horrifying, indisputable certainty of my son's guilt, and the love I once had for him was replaced by a profound and desolate grief for the boy he had once been. The weight of the evidence was crushing, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the decision that now rested on my shoulders. I held my son's future in my hands. The detectives had made it clear, with my testimony and the digital evidence, a conviction was almost certain. I had the power to send my only child, the boy I had raised, to prison for a very long time. It was an impossible, agonizing choice, a true Sophie's choice for a father. Do I protect my son from the consequences of his monstrous act, or do I seek justice for the attempt on my life and the near-fatal poisoning of my friend and colleague? I spent a long, sleepless night wrestling with the question, pacing the floors of my silent apartment. Every fiber of my paternal instinct screamed at me to protect him, to find a way to make this go away, to shield him from the ruin he had brought upon himself. But another, colder voice, a voice of reason and survival, whispered the terrifying truth: the boy I was trying to protect no longer existed. He had been replaced by a man who saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle, a man who would kill me for money. To protect him now would be to enable a monster, and to live in constant fear that he might try again. The next day, I visited Mr. Harrison in the hospital. He was weak, but he was recovering, the web of tubes and monitors a stark reminder of how close to death he had come. He knew the basics of the police investigation. He looked at me, his eyes full of a weary understanding. "What are you going to do, Arthur?" he asked, his voice raspy. Looking at him lying in that hospital bed, the innocent victim of my son's greed, clarified my moral dilemma. Justice was not an abstract concept. It was owed to this man, this good man whose only crime was enjoying a piece of cake I had offered him. My loyalty could not be to the man who had tried to kill us both. I thought back on a lifetime of raising Leo. I had always been the soft parent, the one who bailed him out, who made excuses for his poor choices, who shielded him from the harshest consequences of his actions. I had spoiled him, not with money, but with a lack of accountability. And I had to confront the terrible possibility that my own parental failures, my own misguided desire to protect him from every hardship, had, in some small way, contributed to the creation of the man he had become. The man who believed he could get away with anything, even murder. In that moment, I understood what I had to do. My personal growth, my final, most difficult act as a father, was to stop being his protector and to start being his conscience. I had to teach him the one lesson I had failed to instill in him his entire life, that actions have consequences, real, devastating, and inescapable. I had to choose justice over a blind, destructive loyalty. I had to let the son I had lost go, in order to honor the man I still had to be. It was the most loving, and the most heartbreaking, decision of my life. I gave my full, unreserved statement to the detectives, handing over every piece of evidence, every memory, every painful detail. The dam of my paternal protection had broken, and the truth flooded out. Leo was arrested the next day. The story became a sensation in the city's financial circles, a sordid, shocking tale of a desperate son and a poisoned cake. The name I had worked my entire life to build, a name associated with integrity and success, was now linked to a scandal of the most personal and horrifying kind. It was another layer of the ruin my son had brought upon our family. The trial was a surreal, out-of-body experience. I had to take the stand and testify against my own son. I had to detail his knowledge of my allergy, describe his financial desperation, and read his chilling internet search history to a silent, captivated courtroom. I avoided looking at him, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning with a cold, resentful hatred. The boy I had taught to ride a bike now looked at me as if I were his executioner. And perhaps, in a way, I was. I was executing the fantasy of the son I thought I had, and forcing us both to confront the monstrous reality of the man he had become. He was found guilty. The verdict was swift and unanimous. As the guards led him away, his face was a mask of cold fury. There was no remorse, no flicker of regret, only the rage of a man who had been caught. In that final, damning look, I knew I had made the right, the only, choice. The bond between us was not just broken, it had been incinerated, leaving behind nothing but the ash of what might have been. My son was gone, replaced by a stranger in a prison jumpsuit, a stranger I had helped to put there. A year has passed since the verdict. Life has moved on, as it always does, but the scars remain. Mr. Harrison made a full recovery and has returned to work, our bond of friendship now forged in the crucible of a shared trauma. Sarah, my trusted colleague, has become one of my closest confidants, a source of unwavering support. I live with the quiet, persistent pain of my decision every day. It is a father's unique agony to mourn a son who is still alive. But I do not live with regret. I did the right, the terrible, the necessary thing. Sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from a stranger in a dark alley, but from a person who shares your own blood, sitting at your own dinner table. The betrayal of a family member cuts deeper than any other because it shatters our most fundamental assumptions about love and safety. What do you do when the person you are supposed to love unconditionally becomes a danger to you? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between loyalty and justice? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the difficult, painful reality of what happens when family bonds break. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, and share it with anyone who has ever had to face a terrible truth about someone they love.